session. I'd like to welcome the Regents, Chancellors, campus staff, and members of the public to today's meeting of the Special Regent Committee on Governance Issues. I'd like to encourage any chancellor who has joined us to please feel free to participate in any part of the discussions. Jess, could you please call the roll?
Regent Klein. Regent Bechtel.
Here.
Regent Cologne. Regent Grebe. Regent Manydeeds.
Here.
Regent Miller.
Here.
Regent Peterson. Regent Walsh.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Jess. The record of the September 28th, 2021 meeting has been provided. Would there be a motion I could have to approve the minutes or the record of the prior meeting, please?
So moved.
Second.
Great. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. So we're going to have a couple of, well, three interesting topics today for our governance committee to consider. Starting today's meeting is going to be a presentation on proposed changes to the orientation process of new regents. The Board of Regents office is seeking our feedback on these changes, which are expected to be rolled out beginning with the new regents who will be appointed this year. I'd like to welcome Olivia Woodmansee, Administrative Specialist on the Board of Regents office and a former regent herself. My understanding is that Olivia has developed and proposed some changes to our orientation program in line with national best practices in consultation with some of our regent and chancellor colleagues. Olivia, could you please proceed?
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me today. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, so bear with me just a second. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Okay, excellent. I will kick it off then, knowing that I can't see most people, so if there are questions or comments, please feel free to just jump right in at any point. I want to thank you, President Manydeeds, for allowing me to speak today, and members of this committee for being willing to hear about this important topic. I'm really quite excited to share this presentation with all of you, and I believe that a proper regent orientation is crucial to the success of our board and our system. This orientation was developed after consulting materials from the Association of Governing Boards, AGB, a survey taken of the board from March of 2014, review of orientation materials of other boards, and consultation of current regents and chancellors. Please know that what I'm about to present to you is a proposal, and I would welcome any feedback or questions from regents or chancellors on this call. So today, I'm covering a reimagined regent orientation process, which involves an updated handbook, implementation of pre-orientation tools, a rearranged orientation schedule, a regent mentor program, and a board assessment tool. All right, so first, a new regent handbook. In order not to inundate this committee with tons of materials, it was not given to you in advance. I can promise you it's quite hefty though. I wanted to speak briefly about the purpose of this handbook. So this handbook is designed to be a tool that regents can consult throughout their terms. It is information that the current handbook has, such as statutory authorities and relevant board policies, but it also has a philosophical lens that is embedded into it to instill in regents the depth of the responsibility that their role has and to stress the importance of regents taking a governance, not a managerial role, to issues. So that's really the big change from the handbook itself, and really making sure the accessibility piece is mentioned right at the beginning of orientation. So after that, next, I'm going to go over some pre-orientation tools. So these will be provided to regents in advance of orientation. The orientation model follows a flipped approach, which is what some of our classrooms have as well. Essentially, regents will be given information ahead of a scheduled orientation session to review so that the session itself is focused around discussion and not presentation. We really want to make sure that regents have the ability to answer questions and are not just thrown information and then expect to kind of digest it themselves. While what is listed on the screen does seem like a lot, I recognize that. Just know that it's roughly 4 hours of work that can be completed at any time before the first orientation session, which gives Regents roughly 4 weeks, sometimes longer, to complete all of this information. So for the first year, the tools we hope Regents will review would be an AGB orientation. This is something that would just once again emphasize the fiduciary duties of Regents. Then 3 modules. Modules are essentially videos with some supplementary documents attached. All modules will be given to Regents when they first join the board so that they can complete them at their own pace. The first module is on board meetings, going over the structure, expectations, how to work board effect. Then there will be one on committee structure and how to engage in committee work and how to engage with those materials. As we all know, they can be quite hefty. Finally, there will be a brief module on parliamentary procedure, just to discuss how Regents can make an impact in the conversation during meetings. These modules will be available throughout the terms as well, so that Regents can reflect back on them at any point. So if at, year 6, you're wondering, okay, what exactly was I taught about board meetings? This is something that you'll have access to throughout the entire term. Next, after that, they will be given 3 more modules. I know you're all very excited about the module situation. We will hope that they will review these at some point before their second year. So these will be on search committees and their processes, the capital planning and budget process, and the annual and biennial budget process. Once again, this is roughly an hour and a half of materials to review over the course of a year. So while it looks like a lot right now, you do have a lot of time to review those. Next, the orientation itself. This will actually be 2 orientation sessions, one the first year and one the second year. By breaking them up, it will give Regents a chance to reflect on what they have learned and ask questions about uncertainties that they still have in a very open format. These will be hosted on a campus, one that Regents will not be visiting that year for board meetings. This is very intentional for 2 reasons. First, it's an easy way to get Regents to a campus and for campus staff and leadership to be engaged during orientation. Very similar to how I want chancellors to provide feedback to this presentation. It's really important that we engage chancellors and campus leadership right away during our orientation sessions. But most importantly, for Regents to really understand the impact of their work, it is important for them to see students, to experience what campus life means, and to see the true impact of higher education. As exciting as the 18th floor of Van Hise Hall is, it really, when we first welcome Regents to their role, it's really important that they see what that means by being on a campus. A sample agenda has been provided for you in your materials if you would like to review a more in-depth version of this. But essentially, the first session discusses requirements, committees, structure. Chancellor and other campus leaders will be engaged to provide an overview of the campus organizational structure and answering the questions that I know is on everyone's mind of what exactly is a provost. Comes up every single time, making sure we're getting that answered right away for you. The second session would go over the capital planning and annual budget processes paired with the modules given. It would really be a discussion point, and also these are 2 of the most complex processes that we have, I would argue, and so really making sure you have an in-depth understanding of them right away. An overview of major system-wide processes taking place. These can vary from year to year, so it wouldn't be a set presentation. For example, this year it might be the Administrative Transformation Program, ATP, or something very similar like that. An overview of how Regents can pursue initiatives of interest to them. And then finally, a presentation on a topic of the Regents' choosing. So this could be mental health, sustainability, or anything that interests board members participating in the session. Next, the Regent Mentor Program. I'm very excited about this. This would just be an additional tool to help Regents get oriented into the board, an initial touch point for them. Every board member will have the opportunity to be a Regent mentor and also a mentee. The system is not prescriptive in any way whatsoever. A Regent will be assigned a mentor their first week by the board office. This is done through a nonpartisan system in which board members with 3 years left on their terms will be assigned mentees. For student Regents, it would just be their student counterpart on the board. So, for example, this year, Regents Chris Peterson, Hector Colon, and Brianna Tucker would be the mentors. And next year, Regent Ed Manideeds, Karen Walsh, and this year's non-traditional student appointment would be mentors. Contact will be made and mentors will sit next to their mentees in the June meeting. But beyond this, interactions between the two will be up to the discretion of the regions. So once again, it's not a system that facilitates or mandates any kind of interaction. It's just an additional touch point for regions for if they have questions. So a couple of notes about special regents. So those who do not have those traditional 7-year terms. Student regents will be able to get the option to attend both orientation sessions in their first year, just due to their shortened time on the board. And then ex officio and midterm appointments, their training will be altered on an as-needed basis. But what's really nice is even if we have mid-year appointments, the modules will be available and ready to go as soon as they are appointed. So we do have resources that are available right away, and we don't have to wait until that first year training session gets scheduled for them. Finally, the board assessment tool. This is a tool that will be added to the orientation process, and it will just also be used throughout the 7-year term. So it will be an anonymous survey given to regents twice, once at the end of their terms and once at the end of their orientation cycles, which is that 2 years. So we'll ask questions about the structure and processes that exist within the board to help board leadership and the board office develop tools to help regents succeed. So I know all of this was a lot for you to absorb at once. So I just want to go through what an orientation session would look like for one regent, so you can see kind of how the information is spaced out over time, as I do recognize it's quite overwhelming. So this is Olivia. She has just been appointed to the board for a 7-year term. So her first year, she is assigned a regent mentor. She is assigned the 3 modules that we had talked about, and those are going to be committees, board expectations, and then parliamentary procedure. She's going to be assigned the training from the Association of Governing Boards, which while 3 hours you can take in multiple sessions. So don't know that you don't have to complete that in one 3-hour term. And then she's also going to attend her first orientation session sometime either before or after that June meeting. This second year, she will attend the second orientation session. She will be given 3 modules as well. And then at the end of that, she will complete the regent assessment. Years 3 and 4, actually, there's nothing with the orientation process. This is very intentional. Years 3 and 4, you can get involved in being a committee chair. Regents are often involved in other things as well, starting to begin to pursue some of their initiatives. And then year 5, she will be assigned a mentee. So this is someone beginning in year 1 that she'll be able to mentor through the last 3 years of her term, but also just right away getting engaged that first year. So year 6, she will also be a mentor. And then year 7, she will complete a regent assessment, which is very similar to the one she completed at year 2. So thank you so much for listening to my very brief presentation. At this point, I would welcome any questions or comments. And once again, any feedback from chancellors would be welcome as well. I really want to make sure that they feel as though they're a part of this process. Hope I didn't talk too fast for anyone, and I'm happy to go through anything as well. I'll stop sharing my screen just so we can have a more open discussion.
Well, first of all,
Go ahead, Ed.
First of all, Olivia, I'd like to thank you for doing a lot of work on this. This is something that I believe has been needed for a while. Didn't have anything like this when I first joined the Regents. It was much improved for my second stint, but I still feel that more needs to be done, and this is it. I mean, so many times people don't understand because no one's told them what's going on when we're, for instance, selecting a chancellor, how that works, and why not all the information is available to other regents. And so this is and how committees work and what our duties are. So I really think this is a really good set of information for people that are joining. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Karen.
I'm very excited.
Olivia, I just wonder, so what were the aspects of the previous method of orientation that you were trying to tweak or reasons why you added things that weren't there before? Did you have feedback from regents or, how did you make those choices?
Of course. A lot of it was to do with national best practices, if I'm being completely honest. So looking at AGB resources and also other systems, I saw that we were really lagging in terms of how we prepared regents. Also, I'm going to be honest, in my own Regent assessment, there were questions that I had, and this was something that I was very excited to join the board office and kind of look at a bit more. Ironically enough, there was a 2014 assessment done of the board, and it was basically a survey to all board members. And on that survey, questions about the Regent orientation process came up, and they were still issues that hadn't been resolved today. So I looked at that to kind of mainstream it as well. And then there was also significant interest from chancellors to be more involved in the orientation process. And so taking all of those together, I tried to revitalize it with all of those kind of different opinions at play.
Thank you.
Regent Peterson.
Well, thank you for that great presentation. It was really interesting. All of us come from a different background, and some of us come from backgrounds where, all these acronyms are used for this and that and the other thing. I find that it takes about 3-4 years just to have the guts to say anything that is even slightly controversial or showing how stupid you are, whatever. The point is, I think that what you lined up here is what we need to make it so that people can jump in and be more involved right from the first year. And I do think that it's easy for people to use all the acronyms. The acronyms are really, really make you feel really uncomfortable when you have no idea. I remember I was in this board one time and I sat next to the chairman and I was the secretary and I was on this, it was a state board. And I thought, and he would sit there and I would be taking notes and then they'd throw out these acronyms and then he would just write on a paper what it meant so that I would get that. I think it's that having the mentors, having people do like you did today, Olivia, and you said what the governing board was. Some of us maybe don't know that. So I really appreciate the efforts, and I do think that we have to appreciate or recognize that people are in different places when they come on this board.
Regent Bechtel.
Let me join the chorus of thanking Olivia. This is thoughtful, Olivia, and an excellent presentation, so thank you. Three thoughts for you. I'm wondering if maybe in the organization and structure of UW system, in that module 1 or 2, that we might not tease out a little further the role of the system versus the campuses. So just be a little more explicit about that. We're gonna be doing a lot of work in that area, as you know. You mentioned philosophical governance issues in the Regent manual. Is there a particular type of governance model, Carver model, or anything that's explicit that we're orientating the Regents on?
It will be more governance and what that actually means. So the SUNY system, or the system in one of the systems in New York, lays out, what roles and responsibilities a governance board has, and it will be very explicit. So I'm referencing Chapter 36 in statute. I'm referencing our Regent policy documents to see, okay, where are the board's duties? What do they lie in? I think sometimes for board members, it's very easy when you hear concerns from everyone to kind of get involved in those managerial aspects. And so, as Regent Peterson had mentioned, coming in with just a framework and understanding of what is a governing higher education board, how can you be the best fiduciary in that role? That's what I'm trying to get across in the handbook with that philosophical intent. I hope that answers your question.
No, that's perfect. That makes sense. So really to stay at the governance and strategic level and not get operational.
Yes.
Last thought for you, and this might be more for Karen and Ed, but I wonder if maybe in that board assessment early on you get a sense from the regents what are their particular experiences or their particular interests. So as you think of us as regents and where you might fit us into the different committees or what we may be interested in, I just wonder if that might be useful for you to gain that early information. So thanks again, Olivia.
Yeah, in response to that, Scott, I think it would be, because many times we're just filling committees based upon what we believe the person might be interested in. Although some people do contact us and say, don't put us on that committee or put us on this. I don't know which committee I'm talking about right now, but there is one that people don't want to be on. And I was guilty of that too. But this would help us with that, I'm sure. Did Regent Miller has a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. This was excellent. Just one quick comment. I was appointed sort of, I don't know what the term is, but midterm because of the unfortunate passing of a fellow regent. So I'm just making the comment that you may want to just make a provision for a crash course or something until the regent can get in line with the other normal appointments in May. I mean, everybody was kind enough to kind of let me do it solo in February or March after I was appointed, but just something to think about for those kind of irregularities that I'm sure will happen again in the future. Thanks.
Regent,
Can I, Mike Falbo here. Can I speak, please?
go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. I'm speaking as a Regent Emeritus, whatever I am, Regent President Emeritus. And by the way, that 2014 survey was when I was president of the board. So I guess we must have tried to do something. But to relate to you all an experience I had that you probably can't get because it's so hard to get in that seat and feel comfortable or feel that you're contributing. But I sat in the back for a year and a half because we had our political doings back then in 2004 because a person wouldn't leave his seat. And I sat right between a lady named Pat Brady, who was our chief legal.
Oops, Mike, we just lost you. Okay.
Whoops. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay. So anyway, I sat in the back of the room between Pat Brady, the legal counsel, and Debbie Durkin, the chief financial officer, for a year and a half. When I got to the table, I felt like I was the most prepared regent ever.
I hope that's not an argument that everybody should camp on their seat just to make sure that the new regents can get ready. Yeah,
Regent
oh,
excuse me,
Hector,
Kevin.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Olivia, great job. I think this is a really good structure. It will be very helpful to get all of us up to speed as quickly as possible. I noticed that in your process, you mentioned that Chris and I think someone else would be a mentor. And I just want to remind you that I came in midterm for somebody. So I feel like I still need a mentor. So if you would be willing to be my mentor, Olivia, I'm happy to be a mentor towards others. So thank you.
Regent Walsh, go ahead.
Yeah, one point of confusion, I think, or uncertainty that I had when I started, and that I think some other folks have subsequently had, is really the lack of understanding about what are my expectations vis-a-vis the committees. Okay, I'm expected to be on 2 standing committees, and there are these other things. And if I have interest in leadership, what's the path to that? How would I make myself prepared for that? Because I feel like one thing we're always missing in here is kind of succession. And, succession occurs whether or not there's a change in governors, right? There's always going to be a need for leadership succession, whether it's the board itself, president and vice president, or whether it's the committees. And, how long, if I agree to chair a committee, how long will I do that? Will I be chair of this committee for the rest of my term on the board? These things aren't written down anywhere, and they're questions I commonly get. And I give the best answer I can. So that might be something worth going over. And what are these sort of extramural appointments that some of us have to take? The hospital board, AGB, the VOTEC board, the research park. I mean, that's over and above what what you would do in the normal course of attending Regent meetings and um, uh, doing your standing committee. Oh, there are these other things, plus the awards type of thing. So I feel like a clearer picture of, the definite obligations right away as I start. What path or trajectory do I need to communicate that I would like to be on? That kind of thing I think would be helpful to folks. And I've been promising Jess for probably a month a document that I've been working on about running a search, chairing a search. That's another thing that we need to have people in a position to understand what the expectations are and what are the issues they have to watch out for. I'm going to pass the document probably at the end of the week to a few other regents who have also chaired chancellor searches, for example, and see if we've missed anything. And then I'm going to forward that document to you guys, and you can parse it up however you want, add, take away. But, that's another thing. I mean, it's one thing to be serving on a chancellor search. It's a whole nother animal to be chairing it. So, okay, I'll stop.
So you're what we call an expert witness in my profession. So I'm waiting for the document, Karen.
Okay. You'll get it. You'll get it.
Regent
Karen,
Peters.
I'd be happy to review it also.
Yes, and you were on the list, so you're not going to weasel out of it. I mean, you're not going to be able to decline that. So yes, you're on the list.
Regent Peterson.
Hurry up with that. I think it's a great idea. It's a
Yes.
wonderful idea. And
Yes, and
it
there.
it shouldn't be that we're shooting, just kind of shooting in the dark and everybody reinvents the way that they're supposed to do this because, and one more thing so I got a call real quick. I got a call on just a random day from my assemblyman saying, Chris, would you be interested in being on the board of regents of the University of Wisconsin system? And it was like, oh, I've always wanted to do that. He told me there was going to be a 2-day meeting every other month. And that was it.
Oh my.
There is a little bit of information that maybe all of you know this, but up here, up where I am, I had no idea. I don't think all of us would admit we had no idea how much work it was. And so
Wow.
I just think that that's a really important, people have to kind of know what they're getting into. And I'm thrilled to be into it. I'm not saying that, but anyway, hurry up and get that thing done.
Yep, working on it. And I think just to dovetail a little bit off of what you said there, one thing I've tried to communicate to the governor's office in the midst of appointments since I came on the board is make sure they understand the time commitment involved. I think truly sometimes we get approached about doing things like this without having any idea what we're really signing up for. The only reason I had any idea was because I had talked to Regina Milner before I was ever nominated. I said, well, are you going to miss being a regent? And then she just reeled off all the good and bad all together. And I think I must have turned white. She goes, it's really not that bad unless you're in leadership. Thought, okay, great. But yes, I am working on it, and I swear to God, I'm almost finished with it.
Do we have any comments from chancellors or provosts who are on the line regarding the regent orientation materials?
Hi, Regent Manides. Am I on? Can you hear me okay?
We're on now, yes. Go ahead, Chance.
Thank you, Regent President. I offered my comments to Olivia, and I think it's a great idea, and I'm just very supportive of this because every time a regent comes to our campus that's new, we try to provide a standardized approach, but we also know that this is just one campus, and there's many other campuses, many other perspectives. So I really like there being more standardization. One of the, I gave a few watch outs, some things that would be, I think, some additional roles to reinforce student life and some of the things. And I think that will be really great, but also making sure that Regents do get a good, complete understanding of all the different campus types of activities, and particularly the types of issues that are so relevant, mental health issues and other things that was a little bit missing in the first round that I saw. But I'm very supportive of this. I think it's a great idea. I did throw a watch out in about the time. That's what I'm hearing from a lot of the regents, because this could become a lot of additional work. So sensitivity to that. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. Anybody, any other chancellor? Okay. Well,
While we're waiting for a chancellor, I want to make a comment about something else. I've sort of heard through the grapevine that some of the campuses are just a trifle wearied by all the regent visits, and the idea that, well, they're always coming to our campus, and of course you feel like it's a big deal, and rightly so. I'm reluctant to discourage people from doing that. In fact, I'm probably one of the guilty ones who's been encouraging new regents that came on after me to visit the campuses. And I'll tell you, I'm going to continue doing that. And the reason is that was advice Regina gave me when I got appointed. She goes, as quickly as you can, go out and visit the campuses, because boy, does that ever change your point of view. To actually be on the campus, to meet the folks from the comprehensives. And for me, my experience at Madison was very deep, but I'd never been to UW Milwaukee. I had never been to UW Green Bay, or I think I'd only been to maybe 2 of the comprehensives in previous lives. So I know how tough that can be on the campuses, and I so have appreciated your generosity with all these visits, but you cannot imagine how helpful that is to a regent in terms of getting wheels under him or her. It's so helpful.
Chancellor Frank.
Hi, thank you, and thank you for asking for our input. I would just support what Regent Walsh just said. It's important for the campuses too to have you visit, to have that time among various stakeholder groups, and just to have the ability to tell the story and also to ask some important questions, and for really form that relationship. The other thing that I would mention related to this is I didn't hear in Olivia's presentation any mention of the Regent Buddy process where the campuses are assigned a Regent Buddy, and just some perhaps thinking about what is that meant to achieve, because I think it could continue to grow and become a pretty rich relationship, sort of a deeper an ability to develop a deeper relationship with a regent through that process. But I know COVID presented some challenges for that, and so just to think a little bit more intentionally about that might be productive. Thanks.
Thank you, Chancellor. I think COVID really shined a light on the need for this, and we have several members, regents that are new, that I completely forgot were in the boat where they didn't really realize what was going on, and we were in the middle of some important things that weren't explained, and so this is going to be something that's going to help us cover that, because sometimes we all get busy with other things and forget to talk to each other about things that we need to. And so I think this is great, Olivia. It really is. So it's going to be rolled out with the new incoming regents. They're going to be on this track right away, and thereafter, right?
Yes.
And if one of us wants to take advantage of it, we could also partake. Correct? That's going to be.
Yes, all of the current regents, once the modules have been developed, we waited to develop them before getting kind of the light approval of this committee. But those will be developed and then given to all regents, so everyone will have access to them, and then it will be rolled out this year, with current regents being welcome to join the first session, I believe, bearing any logistical issues from campuses and scheduling and all of that.
Well, this is more of a procedural issue, so I don't think we need any motions or anything. We're just going to go ahead and inform other regions of this and then implement it, correct?
I believe so, yes. And if anyone has any additional comments in the interim, please, you're welcome to email me. I really appreciate taking the time.
Thank you, Olivia. All right. Unless there's anything else, we're going to go on to the next issue, which is one of the things that we were really, as a committee, interested in pursuing and finding out how we should handle this issue, and that's the equity, diversity, and inclusion situation in regard to what is the role of the system. We know that the campuses all have their programs in place. We don't really know as Regents a lot about them, so we're trying to gather that information. But in addition to that, because you recall that in September, Dr. Warren Anderson presented his vision of a system-wide common metric kind of approach to this issue. And we were ready to discuss it. And then Dr. Anderson left, accepted another position. That position has yet to be filled. It's still vacant. And that'll be one of the first things that I think President Rothman will be faced with, along with many other things. But I can tell you this, that it's still being talked about and worked on, and interim system president Falbo has asked Dr. Tanya Wesley, the vice chancellor for student affairs at UW-Whitewater, to work with other campuses, the senior diversity officers on those campuses, to develop a framework for guiding values and principles, which will be meant to inform the leaders in the system about what the best approaches would be for us going forward. So Dr. Wesley is here to give us her overall view of what she's been doing and her recommendations and what the conversations have been like. So, Doctor, if you could please go ahead, I'd appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, President Many Deeds. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, I didn't want to go get rolling and then everyone's like, you're muted. So good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for giving me a few moments of your time this evening on your agenda. It sounds like you have many things to discuss. And as President Many Deeds mentioned, I have been given this task, this opportunity to really take a look at where we are as a system and taking also a look at all of the campuses regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so through this process, there have been many phone calls that I have made, many meetings that I have had with folks that work at the system, in the EDI office, as well as with our senior diversity officers. I've had the opportunity to review many documents and policies that are out there, campus policies, and ask some very pointed questions about staffing, needs, and just those basic follow-up questions regarding the senior diversity officers transition document that they submitted to UW system. And what I can share with you all today in all of those interactions through conversations, phone calls, meetings, is the senior diversity officers are really looking for system, like that question, what role should system play? They are really looking for vision and direction, capacity building, professional development, workshops, trainings, seminars that focus on EDI efforts, initiatives, trends, best practices to develop not only themselves, but also their staff and various constituency groups across their campuses, but also to provide support when they are responding to whether it be incidents of hate bias on campus, whether they are working with human resources on campus with hiring practices and being more inclusive. When it comes to various resources that can be potentially shared system-wide, they would really like system to serve in that consultation, providing guidance, as well as assisting with any shared resources that could potentially help them really thrive in their position and lead on their campuses, any efforts and initiatives, as well as programs that surround EDI. So I just wanted to give you a clear sense of what I have gathered and heard directly from senior diversity officers and others about what role can system play in this work. Through those conversations as well, the thought has come up regarding strategic planning. And so I have looked into strategic planning. I've also, with the encouragement from many others on our transition team, is to look at other system schools who's doing this work fairly well. The three system schools three systems across the nation that I identified was the California State University system, the SUNY system, and Minnesota, the Minnesota State system as well. Those systems are doing this work really, really well. And they have provided some really solid examples of things that we can do. Once I had the opportunity to look at those systems and reach out to folks that work there, I took a hard look at where we are as a system. And to be very transparent with this group, we are missing. There's a huge gap right now that exists for us as a system. In my research and looking at our website and having conversations, looking over documents, where I was left with a big question. Where are we? Where do we stand when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion as a university system? Now, I think that our campuses have strategic plans, goals, values, but what I heard directly from senior diversity officers is that they really want that overarching vision, direction, goals, and objectives to come from UW system to lead and also and serve as a foundation to what campuses are able to build their strategic plans, and their goals should be centered around that. Also, through that assessment, we're missing that information. And as a system, I think that is really critical before we can even talk about strategic planning. We need to build an infrastructure. If we start first in looking at the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion office at the system level, it's really what an office of, we have a chief diversity officer, and we have one other position that is full-time committed to supporting the chief diversity officer at the system level. But if we take a step back and look at the current position description of the chief diversity officer at the system level, it's huge. It is a lot of work. And what I found in the other system schools, they have built an infrastructure to support the work at the system level. And that's exactly what I plan to recommend. If we really are serious about this work, if we really want to move the needle, if we want to increase our students from underrepresented groups across our campuses, if we want to increase diversity across our faculty and staff that we're hiring, we really have to look at where we are setting the tone, priorities, and expectation and support at the system level regarding this work and who's leading this work, which is the chief diversity officer. This person has to have support. And when I look at the other system schools, they have minimally 4 people that are staffing the office at the system level. They have values, goals, and objectives that are supported in board of regent and system policy. They provide feedback and are at the table when decisions are being made and conversations are had regarding hiring practices, programs and initiatives. And EDI isn't just solely focused outside of the classroom. EDI is integrated and infused in the system culture across every single facet. And when we talk about moving the needle, that's the type of infrastructure we have to build in order to support that level of effort. So my number one recommendation will be taking a look at, we first need to develop goals and objectives at the system level. What do we stand for? What do we believe in? How do we help external constituency groups understand exactly who we are and how we value and engage in the work of EDI? The first step to that is developing solid goals, objectives, and values for UW system administration. Taking a look at that, and building that part of the foundation, it's also going to be critical when looking at the position description for the Chief Diversity Officer. What truly makes sense? Is this really, do we really have the ability, one person have the ability to fulfill the duties and responsibilities outlined in the position description? Does it need to be reevaluated? So those are the things that I will be working with the senior diversity officers, as well as Dan from Human Resources at UW System, to review, look at what our gaps are as an institution, as a system, take a look at what campuses truly need from UW System, what programs, initiatives, and supports should be headed up by our EDI office at the system level, and use that information to inform our thinking of what truly makes sense in this position description. And if I could add a little bit more on that, the reason why the position description, reevaluating, revisiting, and restructuring that, and basing that restructure of that PD off of the infrastructure at the system level is important, is because we want to make sure that we are recruiting candidates for this position that really is experienced, is well researched, they have proven practices of changing culture, those that have experience working at the system level, and will be able to provide guidance and consultation to experts, as the senior diversity officers are in this field and doing the work, and being very strategic and thinking broadly from a system perspective of what strategic planning truly needs to look like. So we have to build this infrastructure in order to be attractive for candidates to come in and see that UW System is serious about equity, diversity, and inclusion, that we are on the road of building, that the candidates applying for this position truly understand that we've laid the groundwork and the foundation, but this person will be coming in to build and develop key performance indicators, metrics, and will have a seat at the table with staff to support and a budget to support the work that's happening across the system. Because there's great things happening across many of our campuses, but what I've heard loud and clear is our campuses really look for that guidance and support from the system level. The other thing, and I'm just taking a peek at my notes here, when it comes to next steps and things that I have in place of moving forward, I will be meeting with the senior diversity officers again tomorrow afternoon. And based on my conversation with our transition team, there's some specific things that I'm obviously going to be digging or diving a little bit deeper into. The things that I will be looking at is, what should be obviously the EDI goals, values, and objectives that UW System should adopt. How can the Board of Regents support the work of EDI at the system level, as well as the campuses? How should UW System support campuses, EDI programs, and initiatives? And what I've mentioned to the team prior to this meeting is, before we should search for filling that senior or chief diversity officer position, it will be critical for us to set and have in place those values, goals, and objectives for the system. And what the question that came up was, well, if we wait to hire, say if it takes us 2 months or 4 months before President Rothman starts, or after President Rothman starts, what needs to happen for campuses regarding support in the interim? So that question, along with the ones that I just previously mentioned, will be the questions that I will gather more information in consultation with the senior diversity officers. I will also have the opportunity to touch bases with chancellors as well, because this work is so critically connected to our leadership across the campuses. What I've heard from senior diversity officers, many of their profiles on campus is different. Some are senior diversity officers and SSAOs as one person doing that work, which I think is a mammoth undertaking? And how can someone truly commit to moving a needle and having institutional change at a campus with two huge positions to carry? Some report directly to chancellors. Some senior diversity officers do not report directly to chancellors. Some have staff, some do not have staff. Some have sufficient operating budgets, some do not. So the other piece that's going to be important to take a closer look at and what we will need partnership. And this is something that UW's system will need support from provosts, chancellors, senior diversity officers, vice chancellors for student affairs, is how do we all see our work in supporting EDI efforts in senior diversity officers? We have to make sure that those individuals that are serving on cabinet level positions or serving in cabinet level positions are supporting this work. They're integrating EDI into their work, and they are also working in partnership and collaboration with senior diversity officers. And that can only happen from the top, right? And we need to have that message very loud and clear from those that I've named, such as the chancellors, the provosts, our administrative affairs vice chancellors, because a lot of those individuals supervise human resources who develop policies and procedures for hiring practices. So I want to pause there because I probably gave you a whole lot, and I want to give folks the opportunity to ask questions. I can clarify things. The one last thing that I would also add that I'll be working with senior diversity officers on, and also tapping into some of my resources at other systems, schools, is EDI metrics. What we know is those EDI metrics should serve three purposes. They should diagnose risk areas and opportunities for our system and our campuses. They should track the progress of any initiatives that we kick off and we support. And it should also calculate the return on investment. And so I recognize and know that those are the three priority focus areas regarding EDI metrics. What is something we have to still figure out is what exactly should those things be? And I think some of those things we'll be able to identify now, but I also think those things will develop and evolve as we continue down this journey of developing our infrastructure and begin to tap into strategic planning as a system.
Regent Cologne.
Yes, thank you very much, President Manny-Deeds and Dr. Wesley. I appreciate your presentation and your thoughts and your expertise with equity, diversity, and inclusion. I have three questions. One, I heard you kind of describe the framework that I believe you said, or maybe how I understood it, that should exist at the system level through the system president, and I would say through the Board of Regents. And you talked about goals, objectives, values. Did I hear that correctly?
You did.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Okay, and so I think the question or maybe the comment to all of us here is how can we start moving forward with that? And based on your learnings from California State, SUNY, and Minnesota State, are there frameworks that they have that you could share with us? Maybe this is something the new system president and all of us really take on and start moving forward with this. So I heard the framework, so maybe seeing if we can get some information from those other states to help guide us. And then I also see this, and I'll ask you, Dr. Wesley, that this be something that is co-created with the campuses and with the chancellors versus just by ourselves. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there has to be co-creation. There has to be involvement. There has to be input. What I have learned from my experience is when people have an opportunity to give voice and provide feedback and provide perspective They feel they have contributed to whatever the structure or the infrastructure will be. And so it's important for folks to see this work, see themselves in this work. They also, the leadership has to also see their institution involved in this work and provide a commitment to that. So I think it is important to be able to give opportunity and voice to many different constituency groups, because this work, as I stated in other meetings, this work touches everyone. This isn't just senior diversity officers' responsibility. We all play a critical role in providing support, in serving as advocates, as looking through an EDI lens in every move and decision that we make. We have to understand the impact that our decisions are having on prospective students, current students, prospective employees, and current employees. And so when we're developing policy, when we're revising policy, whether it's in finances, in the academic area, in the support services area, we have to make sure that we're looking through that lens. And so though that is the reason why I would say, yes, that's so critically important to have feedback from others, because there are some things that maybe we're not fully aware of. We don't want to leave anything open or allow gaps to exist. So I think the only way to make sure we're closing the gaps that currently exist is to allow folks to provide feedback. I don't know if I answered your question fully, but please follow up so I can provide more clarity if needed.
Yeah, just two more questions, quick ones. One is so thank you. Yes, you did answer. Based on your research, what you think is the infrastructure that's needed at the system level, the resources, the staff to do this effectively? So it sounds like you said we really have one person, but what do you think is needed? And maybe, and the second question, which is really the follow-up, is have other systems had more of their resources at the system level versus at the individual campus level? And can we redesign our approach to have more pooling of resources that come up to the system level versus the individual campuses? Is that a good idea or not?
So to answer your last question first, because it's the one that's right at the forefront of my mind, I think it's going to vary. There are going to be, every campus is in a different position. Some are much further than others because they have more resources, they have more human power, right? And they have more financial support to move some of their initiatives and programs forward. And then you have some of our campuses that are like in the middle of the road, and those that do not have the resources to hire additional staff. So they have to put people in positions that are serving in dual roles. So I think that there's going to be some system-wide resources that make sense for every institution that every institution could truly benefit from it. And then there are going to be some resources that are going to be very specific to the campus, and that specific campus will need, to tap into that and figure out what the resources are. So I think it will vary just as much as me serving as a vice chancellor for student affairs. When it came to the behavioral health, when it came to telehealth and that resource, that was something that all institutions could truly benefit from. And I think we'll have that same type of variation when it comes to EDI work. But going back to your first question, when looking at the infrastructure, right? That's the piece that you discussed. Yes. What I found across other system schools is obviously they have other systems. They have their senior diversity officer. What I have recommended is we probably should look at the name of chief diversity officer or senior diversity officer if this person is going to be serving at the system level. They should be at a higher title and pay than our current senior diversity officers. And I think that goes along with attracting candidates that are really good. The other thing is we need admin staff. What I've noticed across the other systems, they have obviously an admin staff. They have an individual staff member that's completely focused on programs and events. When it comes to putting on webinars, trainings, when you think about the senior diversity officer work, they're providing training, they're providing seminars for their entire campus, for employees and students. But where's the professional development coming in for them? What tips and strategies can we support them with? That full-time person in the EDI office at the system level can provide that type of support, can plan those programs, can plan those events that our senior diversity officers can truly benefit from. We need someone that's really going to be looking at those performance indicators or metrics, a data and assessment person. When our institutions are developing strategic plans, this individual can definitely provide consultation and support of building those plans and providing them with data, but also tracking that. And that part, which in my opinion, is where accountability comes in. When we talk about accountability and campuses are identifying metrics and goals that they would like to accomplish, say, for example, it's increasing their population of students of color or faculty of color. What type of support are we giving our campuses, our senior diversity officers, in meeting those goals and those expectations? The other thing that I saw across other systems is a communication specialist. And what I think oftentimes we overlook is how much a senior diversity officer is in the role of communicating not only across campus, but with external groups on very sensitive and difficult topics. A lot of the times they are responding to incidents, behavior, speech that's happening inside the classroom, outside the classroom, in our communities in which our campuses reside, and larger communities. And when it comes to, for example, responding to hate bias incidents, as we all know, those that work on a campus, when those announcements, campus announcements go out, it touches so many different individuals. Are we giving our senior diversity officers the training and the skills to represent our institution when it comes to EDI topics, and providing proper communication and providing checklists of here's who you need to talk to first. Here's what you need to do if a hate bias incident involves a higher up administrator, a faculty, a staff member. What does that look like? The other piece that I've seen is there's a staff member committed to academic affairs side. How are we providing professional development for faculty in the classroom when it comes to EDI? And that's the part that gets me most excited. When you look at the California system, they put a lot of attention and focus on developing their faculty and supporting their faculty. What I don't think I want to miss is there's a lot of faculty doing a lot of great work to make their curriculum more diverse, to bring in diverse speakers and respond to EDI in the classroom. How do we shoulder tap those that are championing this work to really assist us in providing training and support? So those are the types of infrastructure pieces, not only with staffing, but also they have a budget, and a budget to not only support some of programs and initiatives where campuses can apply for supplemental funds. That would be great and ideal. But I also know there are financial constraints that our UW system is experiencing, but it is something that we are seeing our other systems are moving the needle because these types of opportunities in their infrastructure is made available to the campuses that they serve.
Thank you. Regent Walsh.
Can I say something, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thank you. The project that our Tanya is working on is so important to us. We put it on the transition team because we didn't have a person in that position. We didn't know, because that person wasn't there very long, whether things were working well or not. And the whole idea is for this group under Tanya's direction to come up with that job description with the goals and objectives of that area, and bring it to a point where, and they stay involved in this too in some way, shape, or form, that we do a search then to bring somebody on. Now it dawns on me as we're going through this conversation that maybe the transition team's not the right place. I mean, I think she needs, or Tanya, I want you to stay there, please, to continue to do this work. But maybe it needs taken up a notch, that this work is done also for the governance committee, and that we do this on a parallel basis because we're all trying to get to the same end. So instead of trying to do work over again, we have this group that's dissecting us under Tanya's direction, that is going to come up with a set of standards and a job description, and some thoughts on how to move forward. And then I assume we will then try and fill this position. And so it's important well past the transition team. So I might suggest, President Manydeeds, if you think it's appropriate, that Tanya's work not only is for the transition team, but also for the governance team.
You know, I agree, Mike, and I think that we need to hear this on the full board, and I don't mean to impose more on Dr. Wesley's time, but she's obviously spent a lot of time and effort, and it's all great information that we need to hear. This is the most helpful discussion that I've heard on this subject in the entire time that this has been discussed at the board. The whole board needs to hear this. We need to hear the recommendations, and we need to hear the recommendations for what the board has to do to support this by either way of policy or whatever is necessary. This makes a lot of sense, and I think if Dr. Wesley would like to help us, we would certainly welcome that help. I don't expect an answer now, but I know you will. But we'll try to fit it in somehow. Regent Walsh, you have?
Yeah. So two thoughts come to mind, Dr. Wesley, with your presentation. I wholeheartedly agree about the metrics. I worry about unfunded mandates related to metrics. And I think specifically of the example that erupted with compliance and the youth program items, which I think turned into a very large expectation for whom some campuses have no one with the time to collect the amount of information and collate it as asked. And I think that that's going back to the drawing board. But I think as regents and as system admin, we have to be sensitive to, okay, we want this data. Who's going to keep this data, and who are we expecting to update it and interpret it? I don't know that but we have to build that in. The second thing is the things that you're talking about with some people on campuses playing dual roles, chief diversity officers, student success coordinators. I think we're running two parallel problems next to each other that are going to create an even bigger problem at the end, because what the student officers have told me at campuses is they've lost positions over the years of budget cuts. And so during the pandemic, we heard many times that those folks were extremely stressed, that they were running these offices with huge need and expectation with a skeleton crew of people. And so my concern is that the campuses need to be able to flesh that out, especially since we're talking about student success being one of our North Stars, right? If we don't have the people and the personnel to make that happen, how are we going at the end of this, when we realize how many people we need to drive the DEI? It's going to create a perfect storm. That's my fear.
If I could just add, I 100% agree. And, you know, there's a question that came up, and I think President Falbo asked the question in our meeting on Friday after the board meeting, and Stephen's point is, well, how far should this really go before hiring a senior diversity officer at the campus or at the system level? And, you know, Vice President Walsh, you definitely hit the nail on the head there. I think with the key performance indicators or the metrics, I think providing some examples and recommendations would be good, but we really need the person in the role to take the time to visit campuses and really assess, not an audit, because folks get kind of, funny when they hear the word audit. So, and truly assess where each campus is, and then use that information to inform their thinking about what truly is doable, because folks are short-staffed. So yeah, I'll pause there and see if there's other questions, but I 100% agree. There's a fine line there.
I don't see any other questions and we're running out of time. I think this is something we could talk about for hours. And Doctor, I really appreciate your hard work and the information you've given us, because I really think we need to hear this and we need more time to digest and discuss it. But I think getting a job description for the person that's going to fill this is going to be great. I really do think that we need to hear it. I think that just reminded me that I should ask the chancellors if they have any questions before we move on. So chancellors, anything you'd like to comment on or say, please proceed. Chancellor Mone.
Thank you for asking, and thank you, Dr. Wesley, for this great work. I'd offer some additional points and perhaps some friendly amendments to these comments. And I say this noting that I have a Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion who reports directly to me. She's excellent. We have developed a framework. We have metrics, timelines, specific accountabilities, and we're really driving this. I would argue that diversity on the campuses is really what's the critical variable here. And my concern with any additional resources added to system are very similar to what we could talk about in terms of compliance, cybersecurity, youth programs, and on and on and on. And I think about what I need and to support this, we're all short on resources. Trust me, on DEI, that's something I think we'd all agree upon. So I think that the challenge here is to find that right balance between Dr. Wesley, how your concept of support versus what can happen sometimes. We haven't seen from system, I'm going to be very blunt here, we have not seen the concept of support from system, generally speaking. I'm telling you what it's like out in the field. We see when system creates an expectation, and I think Regent Walsh, you're kind of going down this path. We found on youth compliance alone, a $700,000 initiative that somehow the campuses have to support. Whoa, and so I'm thinking about the number of positions, and I made a commitment to 50 new diverse hires over the next 5 years, 3 diverse faculty. That's where I need resources. I need additional support in terms of really helping fulfill that. So I guess I'd urge caution about a strategic framework that is system-wide when every single one of our campuses has a very different need and population and profile. There's some themes and clearly some ways to advance that. But I'd just be a little cautious about some of the numbers that would grow versus some of the ways that support could be manifested from system. So thank you.
Any other chancellors?
If I could just quickly respond, President or Chancellor Mone, I appreciate that. And I think once we can get a clear structure together and map out these recommendations, the goal is to also have an opportunity to speak with the chancellors to provide feedback and give us some insight as well. So that's not a miss. I'll have that in my notes to make sure that what you've just provided in feedback is very helpful. So sorry for interrupting, but I wanted to share that.
No problem, thank you. Okay, nobody else is stepping forward. Regent Becker.
Yeah, just very quickly, just to build on what Mark said. If chancellors have plans, I would just encourage us to move forward with those on a simultaneous track with some of the structural stuff. For the reasons Karen noted and others, there's a lot of work to be done here, and I think we should just start moving and taking action, even if it's on a smaller, campus level. Let's not be afraid to do that and see what starts to work and where we get traction. Thank you.
Thank you. That's what we want to do, and we will continue to move forward. And so, Dr. Wesley, if you could keep us in mind and be available for us when we need,
Sure.
we'd appreciate it. Thanks for the great work.
Definitely.
Okay, so now, even though we're running out of time, we've been waiting for Jess to give us her brief overview of the common performance assessment elements that other education systems use to evaluate chancellors and the president. So Jess, could you please proceed?
Thank you. Before I get started, I'd just like to acknowledge Sandra Cleveland. She's a policy analyst in the Board of Regents office. She compiled this paper and the background materials that you have before you today. As noted in Sandra's paper, the literature generally refers to the evaluation of executive positions in higher education as presidential assessments, regardless of the title used within a specific institution or system. A presidential assessment is a periodic review of the extent to which the chief executive of an institution or system has achieved agreed upon goals and expectations for the position. Assessments provide a mechanism for identifying strengths as well as development opportunities for improving a chief executive's performance. The process can also provide a governing board with a better understanding of the issues facing the institution or a system. In systems such as ours, the governing board often delegates responsibilities for evaluating institutional heads to the system's chief executive, or in our case, the president. However, the board still has a vested interest in ensuring that these evaluations are meaningful, which can be accomplished in a variety of ways. A governing board may establish an assessment committee or assign oversight responsibilities to an existing committee to guide the performance assessment process. Board can also adopt a formal policy to establish a process to be used by the system leader to evaluate chief executives. Some boards identify specific criteria in evaluating institutional heads. The board or a board may also, in consultation with the system head, establish system-wide annual goals that could provide a framework for institutional goal setting. The board may also play a consultative role through the assessment process to ensure that the performance assessment information collected meets the strategic visions and goals of the system. Your materials include guidelines used by prior UW system presidents to annually evaluate chancellors. The guidelines identify key performance metrics related to financial and administrative management, educational performance, research and economic development, fundraising, workforce management, and diversity. These existing guidelines also identify 10 leadership competencies. The process also includes goal setting, a self-assessment, a face-to-face review between the president and the chancellor, and a discussion of the performance review with the board in closed session, which is that last piece is the piece that you all are probably most familiar with. Your materials also discuss effective performance assessment practices, some of which are components currently used by the UW system, and identify several topics for further consideration, including the following: ensuring that a full range of leadership traits as they relate to strategic priorities are considered each year. The existing UW system self-assessment guidelines suggest that each chancellor provide examples of how they have met one or more leadership competencies, rather than a more complete range of traits. Number 2, ensure appropriate metrics are used in the assessment process to illustrate strategically important issues and trends, directing chancellors to discuss specific trends and metrics that are relevant to system goals. A narrative and appropriate comparisons analyzing the most significant trends demonstrated by metrics could put the data in context to improve their usefulness. Number 3, consider adopting a formal process for selecting system level annual goals. Annual goals should directly relate to the strategic, institutional, and system issues. Goals should be developed after proper consultation and agreement with the board for UW chancellors or with the system president. Number 4, guidelines state that the system president will discuss the annual performance of chancellors with the Board of Regents in closed session. efforts should be made to ensure that the information provided is meaningful to the board's efforts to understand each chancellor's performance and each chancellor's institution. The specific goals of the discussion and the type of information to be shared could be determined after consultation with the board. Number 5, consistent with practices in other university systems, consider establishing an assessment committee or assigning assessment oversight responsibilities to an existing board committee. One possible consideration here would be to assign responsibilities to the board's executive committee if creating a new committee wasn't desired. Number 6, establish a formal Board of Regents policy to guide the performance assessment process. Currently, the procedures for assessing the performance of chancellors are included in system guidelines and provided to chancellors as part of the assessment process. The guidelines do not describe procedures for assessing performance of the UW system president. Most university systems have established a formal governing board or system policy to guide the process for assessing the performance of both institutional leaders and system leaders. A board policy would provide the board with an opportunity to ensure the process aligns with their expectations, and procedures could identify the roles and responsibility of the board in evaluating the president and chancellors. That's it.
Okay, before we begin discussion, I have to remind everyone this is a public meeting, and so we therefore have to avoid discussing or commenting on any current or former employees. With that in mind, if you have any comments or questions, please proceed. Regent Cologne.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I would say, you know, how can we simplify this as much as possible? So for example, what are the 3 to 5 key things that we think our chancellors and leadership should be evaluated on? You know, I think of financial, you know, are they meeting budgets? You know, I would say fundraising goals is probably under the financial. You know, workforce, are we retaining our staff? I would think culture is a part of workforce, and then student outcomes, and then maybe a 4th is research. I can't think of anything else right now. Maybe there is, but and obviously the trends feed into all of that. We have to stay on top of the trends to make sure, you know, we're addressing students right. We're focusing on the right research. We know our workforce challenges and financials. So I think trends feeds all that. But I would say, how can we simplify it as much as possible? And then on top of that, these additional competencies, I don't know if that's necessary, in my opinion. So I just wanted to share, you know, a lot of this requires a lot of work. And is it necessary? Like, I would ask why, because we don't want to overwhelm individuals with work that might not be necessary. If we can be more laser focused on what's most important for the chancellors in terms of their success, and how can we evaluate them based on that?
Okay, and Jess, thank you, Regent Cologne. Jess, these are evaluations that the president of the system uses to evaluate each chancellor and then relays that information to us, correct? Okay, Regent Walsh.
I'm wondering if, as part of this, we might speak to some of the chancellors about what would be useful to them in terms of evaluation. I feel like they've kind of been left out of that piece of the process. You know, some of them, I'm guessing, have probably set some of their own goals just because that's the way they like to approach it. But I would feel more comfortable with this if we had a sense of what they thought was either useful in what we're doing or not useful. in helping them. And that takes away, right, some of the mystery behind why did I get evaluated the way I did. So it feels a little bit sometimes like a black box to me without that.
Thank you. Chancellor Gao.
Well, as the senior person of 15 years, I can give you a little bit of historical perspective. And when I arrived, I was hired by Kevin Riley. We really didn't do a very extensive evaluation. And then Kevin said, we do need to get something a little more formal. So we did, and I believe it's in the materials that Jess has put together, 3 goals for the coming year and 3 challenges for the coming year. And then how can the system president assist in pursuit of those goals and work on the challenges? And so then at the next evaluation, we would review, how did it work out? And so that was the system in place under Kevin Riley. And then when Ray Cross became president, he instituted a much more elaborate framework that had all kinds of financial ratios and measures of diversity, and it was much more quantitative. That initial approach was more qualitative. And to be honest, that always struck me as, I don't know how much a chancellor can do about certain financial ratios. I mean, certainly enrollment, we can pursue that, but other things that are more, in the details is really much the purview of the vice chancellor for, administration finance. So I'm not entirely sure what you could do. I guess I would say I'd be, as Regent Cologne has said, interested in going back to a more straightforward approach. And that might, the goals are going to be a little different for every chancellor, and the challenges as well. And I like the notion that gives you some flexibility there. Certainly things like enrollment, fundraising, the quantifiable things, they should be in the mix too. But I think I, as a chancellor, find it most productive to be able to talk about what are the goals that are going to be good for the campus, not just for me, really, because if the campus isn't successful, then I'm not successful, and vice versa. So I hope that's helpful in giving you a little bit of that perspective. And I know there are other colleagues who are on the call here who may have more to say.
Regent Peterson.
I really agree with Regent Cologne and also with Chancellor Gao. I having been on 2 committees to select committees for chancellors, we're trying to fit these people to a special campus, and our campuses aren't cookie cutter campuses. And so each one has a different personality, and these people have different goals and different things they're developing. And I just think that what they said about having goals that are going to develop things, and that keep in mind that each campus is different. And these chancellors, at least in my experience, were chosen specifically for the campuses that they were chosen for. And I feel like the suggestions that have been made here are very helpful, and I'm all for it.
Anybody else? Chancellor Mone.
Well, I won't be shy on this one either. So sorry, real quick, some key points. I couldn't agree more with the themes started by Regent Cologne about simplification, but I would add something to that. I think any evaluation has got to be really geared toward the campus. We're all very different. We're the metropolitan urban R1. There's no other campus in the system like UW-Milwaukee. And so the goals that fit at Madison or La Crosse are not going to be the same goals that fit thematically, certainly, but I think we've got to have that customization. That's number one. Number two, I would urge that these reviews be thought of as developmental, as opposed to punitive, as opposed to sometimes, this is my field. performance reviews. That's my background, and consulted with firms and done a lot of research and teaching in these areas. And they can fall down, they can become clumsy. If you just look at how much material Jess shared with this meeting, you can see, you can just imagine the amount of time that's involved. And to Chancellor Gao's point, I spend 3 to 4 hours sometimes with Ray Cross, on a review. That's taking time away from running the campus. And so keep that in mind, developmental, supportive. Number 3, we do get on our campus routinely feedback daily. And I can tell you, we have so many stakeholders running public universities on any given day. So I think if the feedback can incorporate a variety of perspectives, that's good. 4th point, we already have been using a lot of different evaluations, different campuses. Sometimes we solicit it ourselves. So I think somehow incorporating some of that. I have a 5-year review that comes up. I don't know if any other campus does, but it's a campus-wide input. And that's something that could be recognized. And the final comment is, I always wonder whenever I'm looking at any kind of performance review, who's conducting the review and how closely do they understand the job? So that just from an ability to give feedback, in terms of, sometimes it's just, well, if you're in the corporate office versus out in the field, you really understand. And I think some sensitivity to that, and that's where I do think having some perspective on that in terms of how we really get a good, true understanding, because sometimes I think things can be swayed a little bit when you're in Madison looking at Superior or name the different places. So getting that ground view is going to be really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Any other chancellors? Regent Bechtel?
Yeah, not a chancellor. I'll wait for any other chancellor. Okay. Just real quick, Jess, I'm presuming that, and this is good work, and I actually read all of your report, Jess, so I get a gold star for that. But it does show you, and I guess I'll go back to what Olivia warned us at the beginning. We're a body of governance and strategy, not operational. And so it's good to understand the tools, but this is not for us. So I would think the natural progression here, Jess, is that we're going to ask our new president to take a look at this material. He's going to come up with his own assessment tool for the chancellors. I like the idea of simple that Chancellor Gao has articulated. I like the idea of developmental that Mark Money has articulated. I would add, Jess, that maybe there's another data point out there. I know 2 or 3 of these campuses quite well because they're in my communities, they're in my business dealings. And so is there like a board of visitors or local chamber of commerce persons that could be cued in at some point by the president as he or she evaluates the chancellors. And then lastly, Ed, I agree, and I'm actually a little surprised that we don't have this function housed within a committee. And so I think Jess has given us a couple of ideas. Either the executive committee takes this on, and remember too, it's not only this assessment tool, but we have some real concerns about the competition and the compensation and different tools that we can, put out as a system for the good of all the chancellors and have, the very best system, the very best talent. So I don't know if that's in the executive committee. A lot of both public and private boards will have an executive and either an evaluation and compensation committee or an executive and compensation committee. So I'm not looking to build another committee, but maybe we need one just for a couple of years as we undertake this process. So those were my quick thoughts. And Jess, I don't know if you wanted to respond in terms of where we are going next with this.
I think from my perspective, the next step would be, as you suggested, to share this with incoming President Rothman and ask him, working with our folks in HR, to really develop this further in terms of the specifics of the assessment process. I do, however, think there may be a role for the board in terms of either crafting a policy in terms of what they like to see, or maybe developing a committee to consider this further.
Great ideas, and I think that was what Jess and I, particularly Jess, wanted to get across, was that we don't want to be sitting in a room discussing somebody without having a basis for that discussion. And that's what this will give us. And so we're going to, Jess is going to recommend, and we're going to recommend as a board to incoming President Rothman to look at these and develop something with simplicity, geared towards campuses, developmental reviews of their work in conjunction with other groups maybe on the campus to give some input on that so that we can assess people properly. That would be what we would like him to do. And so that's, I guess, the goal here. And we're going to work on it, right? Anyone else have any comments? Because I think we're at the end of our time, back a little bit over. So once again, I really appreciate everyone taking the time to be on this committee. It's very important. We have some more, we're back on track now, so we have other, as you know, important issues to discuss once President Rothman's on board regarding economic issues that are at the forefront right now. So, and we will get to those. So, all right, I think we're adjourned. And once again, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Jess.
Thanks. Good to see everybody.
Nice night, everyone.